This video is going to be changing the kingpin bearings on a Cannondale Topstone carbon. My particular year is 2020. I believe this applies to 2020, 2021, maybe 2022. I think at some point they switched the bearings in here to bushings. So I am going to talk about why I'm doing it. I'm going to cover what tools I have coming into it. And I'm also going to highlight the preparation I did for it. I don't really see many videos do that kind of thing. And then finally, we're going to go through it together, disassemble it, and reinstall everything. So why am I doing this? This bike is 5 years old. Over the last year, I've replaced the headset bearing. That thing kind of started feeling like there was some sand in it. Replaced the drive side bearing on my lefty hub. Replaced the bottom bracket, pulley wheels. Really, this is kind of the only bearing left to replace. And Cannondale does not support bikes forever, and that's kind of what I'm worried about. So like in here, there's an axle. I actually do have a backup crank because SRAM doesn't even make this is a BB3083A, and SRAM only makes that size now in SRAM Apex. So yeah, really worried about that. Want to combat that, get the most life out of my bike by increasing my maintenance schedule. So that's what we're working with here. Coming down to parts, these are things I have so far to start the work. So I have paper towels and some isopropyl alcohol, and that is to get everything cleaned up once I get everything disassembled. I have grease to grease the axle and bearings to make them press in easier. I have a micrometer, and the purpose of that is I'm going to take a lot of pictures of this before I start, and I want to measure the gaps on each side so that when I get everything put back together, I'll know that it's how it was when I started. I have a mallet, and that's for tapping out the axle. I think I actually tap it on the other side, but we'll talk about that later. I have a 1/4 inch wrench to back out the bolts. I have a torque wrench to install the bolts, a series of sockets. The bearings, we'll talk about these more as well in the preparation part. But, I'll talk about the Cannondale number. But on the bearings themselves, it says Bolu, and that is a bearing company. I think they're out of Taiwan. And it's 680 or 6802, that's the bearing size. And then the 3 letters after it is VRD. I do not know if these are the best possible bearings that I can put in the bike. However, the part number is the same as what's in the manual. And whenever I get it taken apart, if the bearings are still good, then maybe that bearing is good enough. Cannondale, I bought these off Cannondale Spares, and it does say 6802 times 2, so each order has 2 bearings, just to be sure they'll order 2, so now I have a backup. And then finally, we have the bearing extractor and press. This is a Cannondale part that we will talk about in a second. So now let's go into the preparation I did to size up this job. Moving on, this section of the video is going to cover the preparation I did to get all the parts and size up whether or not I can do this job. So let's start by looking at the parts diagram. Ultimately, the bearings that we want to replace are part E, and I already showed a picture of that as well as what writing were on the bearings. Do note it is a pivot bearing, which is different than a radial bearing that goes in your wheel hub. We also have D, which is the axle. They call it a lock R that goes through that the kingpin bearings. And then part J is the kingpin bearing install removal tool. I didn't buy the lock R because I'm hoping there isn't damage to it. But if we cruise out here, I got the bearings from Cannondale Spares. It looks like they're out of stock now. I wouldn't be too worried about being able to source these pivot bearings though. And again, I'm just going with what's in the manual, the part number. Not sure if it's the best bearing or not. Here we have the lock R. They are also out of stock. Again, that's kind of concerning because Cannondale doesn't support bicycles forever. And if this part is worn out, then I think there's one I saw on sale on eBay, but I believe the bearings are going to journal here and here. So I'm going to be looking for wear there. And we'll come back to this. And then here's that bearing removal tool. So then I have one more in stock of this. And I looked on eBay. At the time of recording, I didn't see any parts out there for that number. So there we go. Those are the parts we need. Let's come back. By the way, this is just the Cannondale Topstone user manual, owner manual. So the first step to replace the bearings is to remove that lock R pivot stuff. So for that, we have to jump up here. Got some instructions for removal. But the way it looks to me, the game plan here is I'm going to back out that screw 4 to 6 turns so that it'll look like that. I'm going to use the mallet to hit it. And then it says this should be dislodged. However, when I was looking at the bike, there's also a torque screw on this end too. So I'm not sure if I need to remove that or not. But anyway, so I'm going to unscrew this bolt. This one may come out. If it does not, it looks like it's a 5 millimeter. That's only torqued to 1 Newton meter. So that's not very tight. Then there's a 6 millimeter bolt or nut somewhere, or hex somewhere in there. And then as I unscrew that, there's some threads here. So the axle, I think, is going to get pulled out from the non-drive side. And then another reason why I wanted to look out here is I just wanted to get more pictures on what this part looks like. So in particular, we can see the threads there. So as I unscrew from this end, that'll unthread out. And there's also kind of some torque values there, which is good to see. And then, yeah, these are written instructions here on how to remove and install the actual bearings. So we can see the diagram. Because of this diagram, I went ahead and chose to use the Cannondale tool, which was 45 pounds. And the reason being is I'm just a big believer in having the right tool for the job. It will save you both time and the possibility of accidentally screwing something up that you may not have had you had the right tool. So one of the things, this is the removal part. Let's talk about that first. So there's a little bolt in there. I'm not sure what that's called, but number 4. And then here's the receiving cup, which is part 5. So as I tighten bolt 3, it's going to push that bearing into the receiving cup. So I think that's pretty straightforward. It also kind of looks like this tool is made for this with all the right clearances. Another 2 things I'm concerned about as I do this is, one is when I remove the axle, what is the resting place of this arm here in relation to this? I'm doing this work by myself, and if it springs up or down, I'm not sure if I'll need an extra set of hands to stuff the axle through. Another thing I'm worried about is as I put in part 7 and 4 in the middle here, is this frame going to be solid or is it hollow? And do I need to be careful about parts like falling into the frame and then having to retrieve them? That could be difficult. Okay, let's jump down here. This says remove, but I think this is actually the installation. So we have a drift that sits in the frame there, and then as I tighten bolt 3, the drift 2 is going to press that bearing in, and then vice versa for the other side. So, all right, that's the game plan. Let's see. Let's go ahead and start with removing this. Again, I'm really worried about, do I need to remove that bolt or not? So let's get to it. Okay, so a few minutes later here, I have the lock R out. And to explain a little bit on what's going on here, on the left is the non-drive side, on the right is the drive side. The part's a lot smaller than I thought it would be. Okay, so I mentioned that one of my concerns is that there's a Torx on each side, but so I did I broke the non-drive side loose. It was pretty easy to come off. I tried loosening the drive side and it was just a complete no-go. It was stuck to the point where I don't think I stripped it, but I was putting a lot of stress on it. Okay, so you back out this screw 4 to 6 turns per the manual, and you then hit it with a mallet. I had to hit a little bit harder than I thought, or I lied. I was a little uncomfortable, but then this other side will break out. And then the purpose of the bolt over here is because at that point, this thing is kind of free in there. So you may need to put bolts or T25 on both sides to be able to unscrew them because they screw in together. Next, this cup was embedded in there and it was stuck pretty good. And the manual says that you need a 5mm to put in there and try to wedge it out. I could not get a 5mm. So instead what did fit was what is this? This is a 3/16, and that fit in there, and I kind of loosened it, and then it just kind of like popped out. And then the lock R takes a 6mm, and that thing, yeah, it turned out, but it's kind of hard to get it out. So what I also did is I had a 9mm like deep socket, and let's take a look at how I use that. So I was pushing the axle through, so this fits such that it doesn't like, I'm not putting any pressure on the threads, but it would mate well against the end of that screw there. And I was able to kind of like push it through. So a few other things is the resting place of these in relation to the main frame it hangs out exactly where it needs to be. So that makes me feel like this can be a one-man job. Unfortunately though, if you can see in there, my other question was, is this thing in here gonna be hollow? And it is. You can kind of see on the back half, it's hollow. So what I think I'm gonna do to combat this is I'm gonna rotate the bike forward. That way, like the bottom part the solid part will be down. So if I drop something, it'll just fall there and I can retrieve it. But yeah, definitely a fear there of dropping anything down in there. So with that, I think I'm ready to start kind of attacking these actual bearings. Let's go for it. All right, guys, so I haven't taken any bearings out yet, but I did go ahead and rotate the bike pretty much vertical. Step back here. So all the weight is on that side, so I did weigh that down over there with some stuff. I don't like this, so I'm having to be there. I don't want to trip over that because then it'll probably crash through my window, so that's not ideal. There's a little silver piece that is designed to slide basically through the bearing, and then you need to flip it over and then it'll take it out. So the method, so you can't slide that thing through this, you have to go in between, and I had it resting in there. And then I used one of these picks to kind of orientate it so that it was sitting upright, and then I put the bolt through it. And then, so I had you can kind of see the bolt through there. So that's the purpose of this slit here, so you can then slide that over. And now I am pretty much in position to go ahead and give this thing a go to try to get the bearing out. And it's hard to align that cup to the bearing. You can kind of see it in there. So I hope that's about right, but we'll find out soon enough. Okay, so I have both of the bearings out now, and I have a couple new tools to add. This is a wrench that goes on this. You won't be able to do it by hand. And then another thing is a long Allen key, because you'll need to stick it down in there pretty far to get this bolt here. This is kind of an explanation of how it works. So this is this part right here, you have to fish in there and orientate it, and it's kind of tricky, and then you have to get the bolt to go through it. So that's kind of tough. But once you get it, it slides onto the bearing kind of like that, and then you'll tighten these ends and it will push the bearing into the receding cup. Yeah, that's about it. I also had a pick. I don't remember if I mentioned that earlier, but that'll help you kind of orientate this thing as well. And then when you're done, you can also use the magnetic end to pull this stuff out. The bearings are very shot. They move, but it does not feel buttery smooth. So kind of feels like there's some grits of sand in it. So I don't like that. This is not a once in a 5-year service for sure. On a positive note though, this is that lock R axle, and I'm not really seeing a lot of meaningful wear on the journals. So that's a good thing. All right, now let's go ahead and move into installation. Wish me luck. All right, guys, so I'm in the process of pressing the bearings in. I already have the bearing over here in, and I'm currently pressing in this one. Compared to taking the bearings out, this is a piece of cake, and I'm actually able to just hold this in with my hand and tighten over here. Not sure if you can see it, but the alignment on this side is kind of difficult, so I'm kind of having to hold it here and also kind of guide the alignment of this thing to keep that straight. I'm not sure if you can see it, it's just a little off. But again, this is a lot easier than removing the bearings. Okay, so I'm putting the lock R, well, I guess the bearings are both installed now. I cleaned the lock R pivot axle, grease it up, put it in, and the torque on this, it's a 6mm at 1 Newton meter, so it is barely any tightness at all. And you can see it literally screws into this this arm right here. Not sure what to call that. Now, so the thing that I do want to show though is this side can move. You see the gap there? I can completely have it flush against the frame. Now, before I started taking anything apart, I did take a picture, and I also measured. I had about 1 millimeter of gap there. So I'm gonna try to kind of simulate that. It probably doesn't want to be all the way in, because then when it pivots, it'll rub the frame. So yeah, again, I'm gonna aim for about 1 millimeter. And the next step here is to install both of the wedges, and then finally the final screw, which is 5 Newton meters. All right, so I got everything wrapped up, everything bolted back together. In the previous clip, I talked about how the axle was torqued down to 1 Newton meter, but this arm still had some play. So what I ended up doing is I just made the arm flush with the bolt, and that gave me about 1 millimeter there. And then to kind of take it back to where it started, there are 2 Torx T25 on each end. So you need to have a socket on each end to be able to torque that down to 5 Newton meters. Now, let's have a look at the original bearings. So we're looking at the outside on each here. And maybe tiny bit of rust, but yeah, again, they just don't feel good at all. And the original bearings are J&K brand, and they also are 60, well, they have to be 6802, but that suffix is the same. I can't tell on that one. It's the same as the other. I already forgot, but yeah. Anyway, so difference in brand there, but there's that. Let's see. How long did it take me to do it? I don't know, maybe 2 hours. Start to finish. I could do it a lot faster next time because I've already done it before, and I'll have this video. I don't think this should be something I do every 5 years. I think this needs to be probably something I do annually at least. I don't know if you're gonna go to the trouble of taking off the axle and inspecting the bearings. I don't know, I'd probably just go ahead and plan on replacing them. And then probably the final question would be, can you do this job without the Cannondale tool? And my response to that would be, I don't know, and I don't want to know. Give me the tool all day long. That without it, like being able to pull that bearing would have been really difficult without that receiving cup, because this arm is in the way. But like all in all, the hardest thing about the tool was taking the bearings out and fishing that little thing kind of in between there. But anyway, that's it. I guess I'm gonna go ride my bike now. How about that?